Hi all, and welcome back to this course on unit testing with Xunit and C#. In this one, we're going to be focusing on assertions and specifically asserting equality. So, what is an assertion? Well, asserts are the way that we test something is true about a piece of code that's been executed. In essence, an assertion is what makes a test an actual test. So if you take, for example, our test from the last video, if we were to remove this assert.equals and rerun this test, Xunit will tell us that the test has passed and has succeeded. But in reality, all that's happened is that this bit of code here has ran, and it has ran without throwing an exception. So we're not asserting anything about this specific functionality except that, well, it doesn't break. So if I put that back to how it was, in continuing on assertions, there are many different types of assertions in Xunit that we can use. Normally assertions are based on values, so here we've got is -10 equal to the account balance, for example. But it can also be based on a type of action that occurs. So I can check whether a specific interface has been called and what it was called with and things like that. So you can see what type of options are available in Xunit and what we actually can assert by writing assert dot and then seeing what comes up. So we've got asserting all, we've asserting contains, empty, whether something is false, whether something is null, whether it raises an event. But for this one, we're only going to focus on equality. Now, the assert.equals, or assert.equal, I should say, by default accepts two parameters. You get the value you're expecting from the code and the actual value. So again here you can see I'm expecting -10 and what I've actually got is the account.balance. But you can also see there are lots of other overloads that we can do. It accepts all types, so we have decimal, double, strings, ints, but we can also assert on generics, so we can assert whether classes are the same. But there is a large caveat with that, and I will touch on that later. So if I was to do if I was to do a very quick example about this, and I'll just create a new test, so it's in a separate situation, and we'll just call this Assertion Tests. We can check whether something is equal to each other. So if I was to do a test that said assert.equal 0 is equal to 0, and I was to run that, you will see that it will pass. We can also do the same for string. So we can say, well, does text equal text? And if I was to run that again, we will get another pass. And this will work with doubles. It will work with decimals. So let's do a double, 0.0, 0.0, and rerun it. We will again get a pass. Now, it will tell you if you're doing something wrong. So if you are trying to assert a decimal here, for example, to a string, or a double to a string, I should say, it'll tell you that it can't because they're not the same type. We can also, with equality, do it the other way around. So we can actually say, well, assert something is not equal. So we'll say, okay, I want to assert, oh, that's not empty, sorry, not equal. So we can assert that 0 is not equal to 1. And if we run that, we will again get a pass. Now, there are a couple of caveats to asserting equality. One of the main ones is when I say equality, I mean equality. It needs to match exactly. And what I mean by that is if I was to give you two strings and I was asserting the values on them, and I had one of test, and what it actually gave me was test, this one will fail because we have the capitalization error. This is not the same response. It's not the same value. And this also takes into account with the likes of spaces. So if we have a trailing space, then again the test will fail. And this is something that seems pretty obvious, and it is pretty obvious, but you have to be aware of it, because finding that trailing space or that comma where it shouldn't be can be quite infuriating and takes a little bit of time to solve. Not a massive amount, but enough to be annoying. The second caveat is, I mentioned before that you can assert classes. And you can do this. You can assert that classes are equal. So you can say var account is equal to a new account. And then we can say var account2 is equal to account. And then if we were to assert this and do assert.equal account and account2, it will tell you that this is absolutely correct. But the big caveat on this is it does this by reference and not by value. So when it is checking this, it's essentially checking that their location in memory is the same. So if I was to turn this and say account2 is equal to a new account, now although to everybody else, to everybody who's looking at this, you'll say, well, account is just a bare bones account, there's nothing being done with it. Account2 is also a bare bones account and nothing's being done with it. And we run this, you'd expect it to pass, but it will actually fail. And it will fail because they're two different instances and they have two completely separate locations in memory. So that is something to be aware of if you ever want to do those kinds of tests. And that's the end of this video. So again, thanks for watching. I'm sorry it was a short one. And we'll see you next time where we'll be talking about throwing exceptions and how to test those.